Hey guys, how's it going? This is Watch from the MW Technology channel on YouTube, and in this video we'll be doing a direct comparison between the Samsung Galaxy S4 and the old version of the Samsung Galaxy, the S3. Now, both of these two devices look very similar. They really didn't do too much of a design change on the Samsung Galaxy S4, but really everything counts inside. And funny enough, when we take a look at real-world comparisons, you'll notice that perhaps there isn't that much of a difference between the Samsung Galaxy S4 and the S3. Of course, it depends on how much you use your smartphone and how much you demand out of your products and out of your hardware. But really, let's see if the Samsung Galaxy S4 is worth the update if you're an S3 user. So let's get right into it. Now, one of the coolest features of the Samsung Galaxy S4 over the 3 is the fact that it is actually smaller, even though it has that larger 5-inch screen. The width on the GS4 is about 0.8 millimeters smaller than on the GS3. So actually, the newer phone has a slightly smaller footprint. And as you should expect, the S4 is slightly thinner than the S3, measuring about 7.9 millimeters versus the S3 measuring at 8.6 millimeters. Now, additionally, in terms of weight, the S4 is about 3 grams lighter than the S3. Of course, you'll probably never notice the difference in terms of weight when you're holding both phones in your hand. What you will notice when you're holding both phones in your hand is the drastic change in shape, which may look subtle at first, but once in the hand, you definitely feel that the S4 feels a lot more secure and firm in your hand than the S3, especially if you've been an S3 user for a long time. Now, we've already mentioned the screen size increase on the GS4, which is only about 0.2 inches. Now, even though that may seem small, at 5 inches, it does seem to be a kind of a perfect size, not too big, not too small. A lot of cell phones, I guarantee in the future, will be around this size. Of course, it may still be too big for some people who like to be really mobile, but it's definitely no brick like the Samsung Note 2 or anything like that. So I think it's a perfect size and a great evolutionary step from the S3, which measures about 4.8 inches. Now, there is a drastic difference in terms of the display itself. Now, the Samsung Galaxy S4 upgrades the screen resolution to 1920 by 1080 versus the older 1280 by 720. And this is also going to up the pixel density count to 441 ppi versus the S3's 306 ppi. Now, in reality, from a distance of more than 2 to 3 feet, you're not going to be able to see the extra amount of pixels on the S4. You're definitely going to have to be close in to see that difference. And when you are pretty darn close to the screen, you'll start noticing the text is a lot more finer and crisper than you would find on the S3. Now, is that worth the extra price alone? Definitely not. There are some other features that the S4 offers besides just the screen resolution. But in terms of image quality, both phones still deliver some really impressive looking images that is perfectly adequate for most users. Now, in terms of processing power and the hardware inside, you'll notice that the Samsung S4 has that updated quad-core processor clocked at about 1.6 gigahertz with 2 gigs of RAM, which is almost 2 times better than this current Samsung Galaxy S3 that we're testing, which has a dual-core processor with 1 gig of RAM. And just to illustrate some of the hardware differences of these two devices, we're just going to do a quick Geekbench score and see what the Samsung Galaxy S3 fares with its newer version. And as you can see right here, we got about 3244 on the S4 and about 1270 on the S3. So definitely a huge difference in terms of benchmarking. But when we start loading up different applications and web pages, you'll notice the performance is really quite similar in terms of simple day-to-day tasks and activities. So unless you're doing something really hardcore, gaming or any kind of really processing intensive applications, you're really not going to find a big difference between these two devices at this point. Now, aside from some of the physical and hardware advantages the S4 has, it also has a whole bunch of next generation features that really puts it ahead of what any other smartphone is doing right now, including its predecessor, the Samsung Galaxy S3. Some of my favorite features include Smart Stay, which allows the phone to keep being on as long as you're looking at it. So the camera on the phone monitors your eye and tracks whether you're looking at the screen or not, and determines whether to keep the phone on or off. This feature works pretty well as long as you're in a good lighting environment so the camera can see your eyes clearly. Another cool feature about the Samsung Galaxy S4 involving eye tracking is Smart Pause. So basically you can watch any video, YouTube or from the media player itself, and just stare at the video and it'll continue playing. As soon as you look away from the video, it's going to pause right away. So as you can see, it works really well. And again, you have to be in a decently lit situation for the cameras to track your eye movements and everything like that, but it works pretty well. Another set of features that is a big highlight on the S4 is involving its Air View and Air Gesture mode. So Air View, the basic highlighted feature is its zoom in capabilities. So if you hover your finger over a text message or any kind of text that you need to magnify, you can actually just hover over that text and it'll magnify it automatically, and you can even move around that magnifying glass and see what else is being magnified. A final cool mode that I like is the Air Gesture mode, which basically allows you to use your whole hand to make certain gestures to control your device in certain applications. So one of the cool features is you can open up your photo application and scroll through your album of photos. You can also even scroll up and down and navigate through web pages using just your hand, which will be really handy if you, let's say, don't want to touch the screen if you're doing something such as eating. This is a really cool and handy tool which should be quite useful to most people. Another interesting and useful feature is something called Quick Glance, which allows you to just hover over your phone and it'll turn on the screen when it's on sleep mode and basically just tell you the time and some notifications, missed calls, emails, and things like that. You can probably program it to say some other things later on in the future, but this is just a really quick, handy way to just take a quick look at your phone without actually touching it. Now, apart from some of the fancy new features, we'll take a look at the cameras and see if Samsung have improved their camera technology from the S3. Now, a big improvement on the front-facing camera of the S4 from the S3 is now records 1920 by 1080 at 30 frames per second versus 720p on the S3. And by this comparison, you can see that you'll see a lot more fine detail, and the colors and overall image quality is a lot better on the front-facing camera. Secondly, there's also an improvement on the rear-facing camera. You now have the ability to shoot 13 megapixel stills on the rear-facing camera of the S4 versus the 8 megapixel camera on the S3. And as you can see from this side-by-side comparison, the S4 on the left, apart from its higher resolution, which is going to result in higher clarity and finer details, is definitely producing some really nice colors. They seem a lot more vibrant, a lot more realistic, and there's less overall glare in the overall image, and it feels less washed out than the S3. Of course, the S3 still looks pretty good, but if we're going to compare it, the S4 is definitely the superior image. Now, both devices produce 1080p video at 30 frames per second, but the obvious bitrate on the S4 is definitely a lot higher, as if you review the video closely, you'll find that the image is very, very crisp. All the edges are really highly defined, and if you look at the text and everything, a lot better on the S4 than on the S3. It might be a subtle difference, but it is a distinction worth mentioning nonetheless. Now, the battery life on the S4 has also slightly improved with the accommodation of the larger 2600 mAh battery on the S4, which is at least going to give you 2 to 3 hours more talk time than on the previous S3. And lastly, just as a final comparison, I do have to mention that both devices still have expandable memory and a user replaceable battery. That means on both devices you can easily just open up the back and access the user replaceable battery and expand the memory up to 64 gigs. But other than that, guys, if you have any questions about anything I talked about in this video, please leave it on a comment down below. And let me know if you think that the S4 is worth upgrading if you're an S3 user. I would love to hear your thoughts. And if you haven't checked out already, we've done a whole bunch of comparison videos comparing all the latest generation smartphones that just came out. So there'll be a link at the end of the video for all those videos and also in the description below. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you later. Take care.